Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Dr. Gordon Reid, and I'm the Labor federal candidate for this upcoming election. And I want to start by saying thank you to the Wagstaffe community, and thank you so much for having me to speak today. And I also want to pay my respects to all elders past, all elders present, and all elders emerging. And we have to realise that acknowledgement, we have to realise that reconciliation is more than just words, it's deeds. And that's why I'm proud to be part of a party that will implement the Uluru Statement from the Heart in full, for truth, for treaty, and for voice. So, part of my candidate statement, I just want to take you on a bit of a journey as to what's led me here today. And part of that journey was a shift in one of our emergency departments up at Wagstaffe Hospital, but I've had similar experiences at Gosford Hospital as well. And on this particular shift, this evening shift, about 2/3 of the way through, head to toe in PPE, my mask suction to my face, shield on, head to toe, splash resistant gown, was between the Delta and the Omicron outbreaks. So we were still seeing COVID patients, but we were also seeing patients that had been in isolation or who hadn't gone out to see their GP, so they were suffering from exacerbations of their chronic health conditions and things like that. And I took a moment and I looked around. And what I saw on that night is part of the reason why I'm standing up here today. There was hundreds of people in that emergency department, and a similar situation was occurring with our sister hospital just to the south. There was over 100 people in that department, and they were being treated for a multitude of issues, but it was people that couldn't afford to get in to see their GP, or who couldn't get in to access their GP in a timely fashion. It was people that were fleeing domestic violence. It was people that couldn't get into any housing or any crisis accommodation. And at that moment, looking at the waiting room there, and then looking out at the ambulance bay, where there was really only room for between 5 and 7 ambulances, there was about 15 banked up right down the hill. There was people in the back of those ambulances waiting to be seen, and I just thought, you know what? That is just not good enough. That's not good enough in a country like ours. That's not good enough in Australia, and we need to stand up for that. We need to stand up for our universal healthcare system, to make sure it's universal, to make sure it's equitable, so that everybody can access it. We need to make sure that we are providing housing for those that need it, but not just social housing, but affordable housing. Making sure that we're housing our most vulnerable, and making sure that we provide affordable housing for those that need it. It's making sure that we are supporting those people who are fleeing family and domestic violence. These are absolutely essential for here on the Central Coast. And they're some of the main reasons I'm standing. I'm standing here today for those reasons. And I'd just like to briefly touch on a few other elements of some of the other reasons why I'm standing. One of them is the environment. And an Albanese Labor government is absolutely committed to protecting our environment, and also recognising that climate change is one of the most existential threats to face us as not just a country, not just a community here, but across the entire world. And we need to make sure that we are investing in Australia's future. We need to make sure that we are investing in renewable energy infrastructure and phasing out of our coal and gas industry to make sure that we can provide renewable energy that will cut power prices and provide good, sustainable power for millions of Australians. Healthcare, environment, two absolutely important issues. And I think, on a final note, is small business and secure employment. My family, my parents were small business owners, and we know how difficult that can be. It's all about cash flow. It's all about certainty. Good, stable, supported small business employ people. They employ people locally, and they provide good, stable, secure employment for people. So it's making sure that our small business owners are looked after, making sure they're supported, but also make sure that our workers here locally and right across the country have access to secure, job-stable employment. So, look, I want to thank you all so much for having me today. And if any of you have any questions for me, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Dr. Reid. You mentioned...
Please call me Gordon. Gets too formal otherwise.
Dr. Holt, Dr. Reid. You mentioned there was much DV in the Central Coast. What is Labor's position on getting a family court in Gosford? So my victims or my clients don't have to travel up to Sydney and down back to Newcastle. There's a lot of security issues, there's transport, there's no funding for it. Would Labor support a family court registry in Gosford?
Yeah, thank you for your question. And you're absolutely right. So domestic violence, family violence is, I'm going to use the word rampant throughout the Central Coast. And it's not just here in our electorate, but it's up in the north as well. And I see the end result of that in the emergency department. At that point, it's almost the too late point. It's the too late mark. And I'm not just seeing women who have been in that situation or men that have been in that situation, but also children as well, some in the months old category. So it's widespread, it's an epidemic throughout a society, and we absolutely need to talk about it, we need to acknowledge it, and we need to acknowledge that it's a problem. And I'd be happy to sit down with you after this and have a look and see what that actually looks like. And yeah, have a good discussion with you and see how we can better provide better family and domestic violence support for people here on the coast.
Gordon, Ross Barry from Coast News. The Central Coast community has just won what's been called the most successful environmental campaign since the Franklin River with the overthrow of the PEP 11 permit. And I welcome your comments on the environment. Mr Albanese was in Queensland and gave some very different messages around supporting coal in Queensland. There was an article in the AFR this week which talked about the coal crusaders within the ALP have finally won. Can you reconcile those two sentiments?
Absolutely. So PEP 11 was a community win. Getting rid of PEP 11 was a community win. And it took sustained pressure on this government to stop that project. For the life of me, I don't understand why it took that long to stop something that people here on the Central Coast did not want. People did not want oil and gas drilling off our coast. It was not good for the health of the Central Coast, and it wasn't good for the health of the environment or the local economy. With regards to our environmental position, so with regards to coal and with regards to renewable energy, our policy on that is called the Powering Australia Plan. And what the Powering Australia Plan is basically about, it's about upgrading our existing infrastructure, investing in renewable energy infrastructure, and then phasing down of coal and gas. So what that looks like is it's the manufacturing, it's the construction of renewable energy infrastructure, wind, solar, hydro, within the regions. So 5 in every 6 jobs created out of 750,000 will be in the regions, 1 in 10 being an Australian new energy apprenticeship. Once that is also completed, simultaneously we will be upgrading our existing electricity grids, because at the moment, if we were to plug that into how it worked at the moment, it just wouldn't go. It just wouldn't go. So that's called rewiring the nation. So it's updating our existing electricity grid, it's investing and constructing in new renewable energy, and then it's about the phasing down of coal and gas that's currently providing our baseload power. And then there's some other ancillary things around that. So it's making electric vehicles cheaper. Is one way, and it's also the installation of community batteries that will help reduce the price of electricity around Australia.
I just was wanting to know if you can know any key differences between how Labor would have responded to the COVID pandemic compared to the Liberal Party, or otherwise, God forbid, if there are any key lessons that have been learnt for if there's a future one.
So I think I'm not the only one who will say this in this room. The pandemic was absolutely awful. And that wasn't just for health providers, that was for every member of our community. Every member of our community has been affected in some way by this COVID-19 pandemic. And it's not just the people that end up being admitted to hospital with pulmonary issues, with lung issues, or with cardiac complications, or that need to be intubated. It's families, it's children going to school, it's all those sort of things. So the main differences in how Labor would have responded differently to the pandemic in relation to the Liberal Party would have been, one, to make sure that we were picking up the phone and talking to pharmaceutical companies right across the world about the different types of vaccines, and making sure that we weren't just throwing all our eggs in one basket, making sure that we were talking to companies like Pfizer, like Moderna, companies that produced AstraZeneca, making sure that we were talking to those companies early. You know, we have to be proactive about these things. We can't be reactive, which is what this government has been. They have been reactive, not proactive. So it's all about making sure we have diversity in our clinical options with regards to vaccines. It's making sure that RAT tests were were freely accessible and equally across the community, because we all know identifying the case and isolating is particularly important in breaking the chain of transmission. Another issue is also about business certainty as well. So one of Labor's new policies is to make sure that if there is another pandemic or another natural disaster, let's say a bushfire or a flood or anything, it's giving businesses certainty that they're going to receive support in those times. So they can keep their doors open, they can keep producing their products, selling their products, and they can keep people employed. That's very important. And also, an Albanese Labor government will also ensure that an Australian CDC is created as well. So at the moment, there's no Australian Centre for Disease Control. An Albanese Labor government would ensure that there is one, and that would promote global cooperation amongst the health space and amongst the infectious disease space as well. So they're just some of the main key differences that a Labor government would differ from a Liberal government in pandemic and natural disaster response.